You're listening to the B-Town Breakdown, where we talk about life, art, local news, and all that jazz with your host, Elia Sinclair. Tune in for a new show every Friday at 106.5 KQWZ LP-FM, South King County.
Hello, and welcome to this week's show of the B-Town Breakdown, where we talk about art, life, and all that jazz. I'm your host, Elia Sinclair, and today we're going to kick off with a segment I call Food for Thought. In his best-selling book, Sapiens, author Yuval Noah Harari posits that the ability of Homo sapiens to communicate to one another about things that don't actually exist is the reason our species has outlived other species of the Homo genus and have managed to dominate the world. By things that don't actually exist, Harari means concepts, things that don't exist tangibly, the way a rock or a human body does, but rather things that exist only by agreement of a collective imagining. Concepts can be as common as the existence of a limited liability company, or as intricate as Hegelian philosophy. But regardless of complexity, a concept is not made of matter and cannot be pointed to as an entity. Art is a concept so vital that our expression of it have lived in tandem with our daily experiences for at least 30,000 years. Art begins where language ends. After all, how do we explain the feeling we experience when confronted with astounding beauty? How do we articulate the compulsion to create something with our hands, our bodies, that reflects the unutterable state of being inside ourselves? What if expressing the concept of art, like more pragmatic concepts such as business law or economic theory, is foundational to human flourishing and our ultimate survival? How might we characterize the success or failures of our everyday comings and goings if we viewed them through the prism of the history of the human collective and our unique, limitless ability to create? To exist as a being is an act of creation. No one leaves her surroundings untouched by her existence. So dance in it, sing in it, live in it, relish in the beauty of a pounding creative heart. The work of your hands may be the cave art of the future, where hundreds of generations look back and say, "She lived, and it was beautiful."
You're listening to the B-Town Breakdown, where we talk about life, art, local news, and all that jazz with your host, Elia Sinclair, at 106.5 KQWZ LP-FM, South King County.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Elia Sinclair, and you're listening to the B-Town Breakdown, where we talk about life, art, and all that jazz. Today I'm here with actor, director, entrepreneur, and co-chair of the Burien Creative District Committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Andrew McMasters. Hello, and thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me in. This is great. And as I mentioned, too, I didn't realize there was going to be video, so I'm not pretty, but that's the way it goes.
I often forget there's a camera there,
Yeah,
especially when I'm looking at notes, but...
All right, yeah, well, I'll be looking down a lot, sorry.
Yeah, it's radio. Sorry for you later viewing folks.
That's all right, yeah.
So you have done a lot in the creative space, and I originally wanted to talk with you about your work with the Creative District in Burien, because we are in Burien after all, and that's how I came to be connected to you. But as I was preparing for our talk today, I discovered that your creative work goes far beyond just that. But I would like to start with the Burien Creative District.
Sure.
So if you could first explain, for the good people, what a creative district is and why it's important for a city, even a city the size of Burien.
Yeah. I guess the easiest way to sort of describe it is that the state of Washington put together a designation called creative districts. And so they allowed cities to sort of say, we want to be a part of this. And they set out a few parameters for it, including a lot of community input, how you're going to create the areas, a recognized area of the city, defined borders, high concentration of cultural facilities, programs, things that would serve as attractors for people to come in and sort of be a part of. This actually started long before I even moved here. My wife and I bought a house here in 2018, and I think it started maybe right after that. It was kind of before I got involved. They started having meetings with people saying, we should look at this. We found this designation. I think Edmonds was the first one in the state. And at that point, then people started researching it. So I kind of came in, to be perfectly honest, as one of the co-chairs, kind of standing on the backs of lots of other work that happened of people who've been putting together stuff for a long time. And attended my first meeting, I think in December of 2019, after a lot of work had already been done, and then said, okay, this sounds great, let's get involved. And then at that point, just sort of got involved, and here I am today. It's kind of where we are.
Yeah. So a creative district is a district of?
Yes. So a downtown area or the center of a city area or a city area where you basically define this is where there is a large amount of cultural attractions that people are coming to see. The key with it is that the statewide designation means that we've talked to the city, we've talked to community groups, we've talked to the community and said, we want to have this area marked that way. Once the state has gone through and said, yes, you've jumped through all the hoops, then we get the state designation. The state designation now allows us to leverage state funds, federal funds, anything else we can do in order to drive more creative industry in that area. And to be perfectly honest, part of what jazzes me on it is it's not just, as an actor, and that is my background, my training as an actor, I'd love to see more performing arts.
Yes.
It is performing arts. It is visual art. It is breweries. It is wineries. It is architects. It is anything that can be labeled as a creative industry. Even you talk about culinary arts, so restaurants. And that, I think, is kind of the key that jazzes me, that it's about the art of all of those things in the world.
Inclusive.
Yeah. And then we're going to be leveraging that state money, the federal money, in order to help drive more tourism here, provide more incentives. I'd also love to see some affordable housing going in so that artists and actors could stay where they want to create the work. So those kind of things. And that's sort of our pie in the sky dream.
Yeah, that kind of goes into one of my questions, which was how does one curate such a thing, specifically when it comes to the visual art of a creative district?
Yeah. We, through the group meetings, kind of came up with what do we want to do? How do we want to build this?
Yeah.
What does the community want to see?
Yeah.
And through that process, then we came up with what was the mission statement, vision, where do we see ourselves going, a 5-year plan of this is what we'd like to see within the next 5 years. Those are all things that the state wanted to see, to say, yes, you're organized, let's do this.
So there are two sides to a creative district. As any art, really. There's the perceiver and then there's the artist.
Yep.
What input, if any, do either side of that coin have? Can the community say, hey, we want this in the creative district? And can an artist say, hey, I want to be in the creative district?
Yep.
How do those, how would either side of that go about starting that conversation? And
basically it's going to the creative district website and saying, I want to get involved.
Yeah, in the digital age, there's always a website.
And that is, I'm being perfectly honest, it sounds funny right now, but we are in the process of moving into the next steps of creating, eventually it will be rolling into its own 501c3. It will, nonprofit status. It will have a governance board. But right now what we have is we have a steering committee, and that steering committee is anyone and everyone who wants to get involved. And all that input from the steering committee becomes what is our next direction. So if people say, I want to get involved, get involved.
You can get involved.
You can get involved. You can directly impact what you want to see happen here in Burien.
Wow.
And that, it's just a great opportunity.
And it doesn't sound like there are a lot of caps on the type of creativity either. It goes from culinary arts to performing arts to visual art to what have you, which is awesome. I think that to my mind anyway, when I hear about things like a creative district and funds from the state, I start feeling like it's some land far away that has nothing to do with me. So I would never stop to think about like, oh, I as a person, as a resident, can go and be involved as with an action as simple as going to a website and sending an email. Is there, like, when you're on the website, is there a clear path to who to communicate to? Do you just fill out a contact form or say, click here, get involved?
Fill out the forms and we tell you when the meetings are then kind of get involved. We even have, right now there is a happy hour that has been started, actually was last night, for game makers. Because during one of our first meetings, we had someone come in who said, I create video games. And if you think about it, people might say, well, wait a minute, that's not creative. Well, it's artists, it's actors, it's coders, it's designers, it's musicians. All of this is creative industry.
Yeah.
So video game design is a very creative industry. And now we have a weekly meetup that happens at Logan Brewing.
Oh, wow.
And they meet up and sit around, talk about projects that are going on. We'll continue to grow that. We have happy hours that happen every once in a while where we're trying to put things together just to get more people gathering and say, what's the next step? And then we have our monthly meetings that we're having right now with the steering committee just to say, this is what's happening, where are our next steps, where can people get involved?
Awesome. So if you're listening and you're a creative or an artist or someone who just loves to perceive art and engage with art, you can have a say in this. You can go to the website, which is the Burien Creative District.
Yeah.
I think you just Google Burien Creative District. As you can see, Andrew's a very personable and easy to talk to individual.
Me.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
And get some things rolling for the community. That's really great to see. You said you got involved in around 2019. Is that when it was officially started, the district?
They actually started earlier in 2019, and there's been people doing research for, I think, years before that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember when Shelley Park had sort of started to do the research on this, which just has been around for a while. The first time I came in was about December of 2019, where I sat in a public meeting that was happening at The Point. And they were talking about the creative district. And I thought, well, this is great. How do I get involved?
Well, look at you. And now here you are.
and I was involved in the university district with building a business improvement area, BIA, for the city of Seattle in the university district. So it felt to me like it was a great way to sort of duplicate and use that experience I had here in Burien.
Definitely, yeah. So how has the creative district thrived in your estimation since 2019?
I mean, we've got our designation. When did we get our designation? We got our designation, I believe, at the beginning of, about midway through 2023.
Okay.
So we had our big launch party, which was at the Strawberry Festival here. In fact, we had a huge launch party here at the museum.
Nice.
And had all kinds of great stuff. That was the beginning of that. At that point, then we started to set out what are our steps. The current step that we're working on right now through the state of Washington and WSDOT is to put signage that will be on 509 and 518 that says, Burien, this direction, a creative district.
Love that.
So, I just want to try and get more people who are going, I just drive past Burien.
To
say, oh, wait a minute.
What's
there's
down
something
there?
Here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and there is a lot I'm discovering, as I mentioned off the air, that there's so much here I'm discovering as I connect to more artists and talk to more artists who are either artists or adjacent to artists. It's a really thriving scene for such a small place. So
it really is.
The more eyeballs on it, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more aware we become of each other, the better, because art, as I'm sure you know, is often a very isolating endeavor, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah.
So that's great. So you have mentioned your background as an actor. And I'd love to hear more about you as an artist. Tell me about your adventures.
Well, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit on some of this, which I think is part of one of the statements I used to have above my desk in my company was every artistic decision is a financial decision, and every financial decision is an artistic decision. And it's something I had heard years ago from Peter Donnelly at Arts Fund in Seattle. And that idea of we can't just isolate and say, I do this on my own, right? Where we're deciding where the dollars go, that actually changes how that art happens. Where we're deciding how to do art, that actually changes where the dollars come in. So it's thinking of the art and commerce together in order to continue to grow both.
Yeah, that's very wise.
So that's been one of my, which is why Creative District makes sense to me. That's why those pieces work.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so tell me more about you as an artist. Your background. You can give me the TLDR if you thought. I know it's
wow.
probably broad and varied.
I relocated to Seattle in 1989, end of 1989, beginning of 1990. It seemed like the place to go.
Yeah.
And that was literally it.
Yeah.
Like, it was, I grew up in Philadelphia. This seemed like the place to go. There were more working actors per capita in Seattle than anywhere else. And we are talking
Really?
about the time with a lot of television shows,
Yeah.
movies, events, things going on. So I moved here. I started my company, Jet City Improv. I was one of the founders of that in 1992. So I ran that from 1992 through to 2017. Stepped off in 2017 in order to hand it over to the next generation because it is a 501c3. And then, have been working, doing lots of stuff during that time.
That kind of dovetails nicely into the idea of transferable skills as an artist. And it makes a lot of sense if your driving philosophy was the idea of financial concerns and creativity working in tandem, and one affects the other, which they do. It can be hard for people on either side of the coin, the business people and the artist people, to work well together. I think you're living proof that a sustainable creative career in art practice requires making peace with both, being comfortable with both, making decisions with both in mind. But I'd love to hear about comments or advice you have for any artists listening who may be frustrated by trying to earn a living primarily from art, and giving them hope that, hey, creative careers exist. You often have to forge your own path because it's not like, oh, I'm going to go to law school and then I'm going to pass the bar and then I'm going to be a lawyer,
Exactly.
But it's possible. So if you could talk about that a little bit and how your skills as an actor and your training as an actor have transferred to business.
I think it's one of the, and literally this is one of the downfalls that I talk about of my education. And I think kind of in a lot of education in the arts and liberal arts is, like, my undergraduate was in theater. My master's degree from the University of Washington is in drama. One of the things that got me was graduating with a master's degree and going, no one's told me how to do my taxes. And it's even that idea. Like, no one has told me how to make this sustainable and do my taxes. So the other thing is that I think there's a lot of training that always is about, you're going to be on stage, or you're going to be in television, or you're going to do this, without realizing that these skills transfer in so many different ways.
Yes.
I've worked for about 15 years, a company called Vistage, and they're CEO mentoring. So it's CEOs of companies between 5 million, 500 million, and they're together in a cohort, and I come in and do workshops for them. 3-hour workshops on communication, training. And one of the things that always happens is one of the group will say to me, hey, my kid wants to go into theater. What do I do? And
a parent's worst fear.
Exactly, right. And I always explain the same thing, like, you let them, because the truth is the skills you're going to get will help you with how to stand up and communicate your ideas, how to tell a story, how to be able to be in front of people, how to listen. All of these skills are skills that right now I get paid to walk into businesses and teach people. As a performing artist, or as an artist, I think in a lot of ways, we intuitively know how to talk to people, or how to sort of emotionally engage with people, how to get them inspired and motivated towards doing something. So use those skills. And it really is a matter of figuring out how those skills can be transferable and who needs them.
That's very true. I studied for a time acting in a studio in San Diego, and
nice.
My teacher was named Robert Wald, and he said the same thing, that he had all kinds of people coming through the doors, and some of the people who got the most out of it were business people. Because suddenly they had this confidence, they knew how to carry themselves, they knew how to project confidence if they didn't feel it. It helps a large variety of things that are going to help you in pretty much any industry, I think. And I have been saying, because the first interview was with Burien Actors Theater, Eric and Maggie. And they were talking about, some of the things they've gone through in the years. And including like fires, like a theater burned down, and how you hire actors and theater people because the show will go on even if the house is literally on fire.
Yep.
Very adaptable, calm under pressure, can make something out of literally nothing.
Yes.
And that's a skill that you have. So
I have a friend of mine who is a project manager, and now I'm not sure what leadership position he's in Nintendo. And he worked for years in Amazon as well. And what was funny is every time he got hired, people would go, your undergraduate degree's in theater. Like, what is this? And he described every time what got him hired. He'd say, yes, it is. And one thing you learn is how to motivate people when I don't have a lot of pay. I don't have a lot of pay. I don't have a lot of resources I can give them. How do I motivate them to be able to do their best work? The next thing is I have $5 and I have to build a set.
yeah.
So how am I going to do it? And he goes through all of the things that he learned as a director
Yeah.
in order to help him to do the job that he's currently doing. And every time he gets hired. So it's one of those things where it's that story of what is it you do really is transferable. It's just a matter of figuring out what people need and then how you can provide that.
And that's where the creativity comes in, I
Yeah.
think, because I think a lot of people who have a liberal arts degree, at some point, mine was I have a minor in theater, but I made the very wise decision of getting a bachelor's in philosophy.
Nice.
I've had a lot of, do you want fries with that jokes as an undergrad.
Yeah.
I don't regret it, however. I have had a lot of frustration in my adult life of being like, why didn't I study, coding, computer science or whatever? There have been those moments for sure. So I want to say you're not wrong if you feel that frustration. But I also have carved out a path for myself that's more unconventional, that fits better by figuring out the transferable skills. So to anyone listening who's like, they're lying, I have so much student loan debt and I can't use this degree. It's about like what you're saying. It's like in any sort of capitalist venture, you have to meet a need with a service that fits that need. And you can do that. Like with all these skills we're talking about, you have skills, I promise.
Yeah.
But like take time and physically write it down. Be like, these are the skills, here are needs, here are the industries I'm interested in, and just like map it out until you have a clear direction. Because there's money to be made and you don't have to suffer necessarily because you studied art.
And the suffer part too. I mean, this is actually, my mother had gone, I was the youngest of 4 kids. My mother went back to college when I was fairly young, like about 8 or 9. And she got her degree and she was a teacher. She couldn't get teaching jobs, so she was working as an administrative assistant in Philadelphia for a law firm.
Oh, nice.
And she came home one day and one of the lawyers, a partner, had quit. Just walked in and said, I quit. And they were like, why? And he said, he got a job playing the tuba in the Philadelphia Philharmonic.
Nice.
Now, this is a job that's going to pay him, maybe 20% of what he's been making as a key partner in a law firm. However, my mom sort of came home from that and she was looking at me and said, if you don't do what you want to do now, it's going to come back and find you. And that was really kind of one of the reasons why I said, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm going to school for theater. This is what I love. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think in that way of suffering, I know a lot of people who went, no, I don't want to do this. I have to do something practical.
Yeah.
And they suffer.
Yeah. It's kind of like the choose your suffering
Kind of.
mantra. Yeah. It's not exactly related, but it reminds me of I think it was a speech to a university Jim Carrey gave, and he said his dad was an accountant and didn't want to be necessarily, and then he got laid off and lost everything. And Jim Carrey said, I learned from that you can fail doing what you don't want to do, so you might as well fail doing what you do want to do. If you think failure's going to happen, then fail doing what you love. Right?
It's a great point. It's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. It is possible. I think I've been reading the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, the best-selling, the prehistoric, it's a brief history of humanity.
Got it.
And so figuring out like how we got here and how creativity has kind of been the cornerstone of the Homo sapiens survival has really been like, this is a foundational living thing that really we owe our survival to, our ability to adapt and to create. Has led to us being the top of the food chain when we were very much not at one time.
Right.
So all that to say, Study art.
Yeah, study art.
Be artists. Go to school.
Well, and I also, even taking one class, or doing something creative can help you then to figure out what that next thing might be.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I have family members who are actuaries, and they love it. Wonderful. You know what? That's where you are. Rock and roll. Make it happen. The next thing is, what else do you do? Is there something else that you do on the side that is, well, I do painting, or I do Tai Chi, or I do this, and those other things also will feed into your work.
Yeah, it's true. And you can't create from an empty cup. I often,
Correct.
I've made the case that day jobs are actually wonderful for artists because you absorb so much of the world. I did so much writing when I worked at a used bookstore in San Diego because the interactions one gets, I feel like there's a certain type of humanity that goes to a used bookstore. And it was an endless supply of things to write about. Or people, who come in who are readers, you just have these huge off-the-cuff, deep conversations about literature and philosophy with complete strangers.
Yeah.
And it's like that fills your creativity as opposed to, just sitting in a dark room all day or working from home, which eventually I worked myself into that situation. And then suddenly like, oh, inspiration's dry. Why? Because I'm not interacting with someone in like, months. This is pre-pandemic before everyone was doing that. So
I had a friend who did used to transcribe court documents, and his thing was like, I would have never thought of that name, and he's a writer, so he kept that name is wonderful. I'm taking that name. All right, so he would file away these amazing names that he would hear from this.
Yeah, take pieces of the world and turn it into art.
Turn it into your art.
Why not? You said something earlier that I wanted to circle back to when your friend was explaining their transferable skills. And someone's like, you studied theater. And he said, yes, and. A very improv, the basis of improv, the yes, and. And I want to talk more, I guess it's just, I don't want to belabor the point of how like creative skills are transferable to life. But I hit a turning point in my life when I realized I was going to approach life in a yes and sort of way. Because I tend to be like, hit a roadblock and be like, just get really frustrated. Instead being like, yes and kind of pivot. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of lessons of life that improv has taught you, because you ran your nonprofit. What was the name of it? Your
Jet City Improv.
Jet City Improv for 25 years.
25 years.
So surely those principles have been ingrained somewhere in that amount of time.
They have, and I've actually, I still use the sort of nomenclature of yes and. I still use that. And right now I kind of change a little bit more to, it starts with three parts. It's how do I listen? How do I accept what I've heard? And how do I build on it?
Yes.
So it really is listening, accepting, and building. And those are the three. And now, and you can see this on the video if you watch, I have these little wristbands that say yes and on them.
I love that.
I'm going to give you that one. I just took it right off my wrist.
Yes.
It also has my website on the other side. So it's marketing.
Beautiful.
Oh, I know. So,
marketing, yes. A great reminder.
I actually give these to corporate clients.
That's very smart.
Because, I can buy them in the $8,000 for $4.
Yeah.
But the idea is, I think that idea of when something new comes to me, am I blocking it? Am I resisting what is the natural flow of something that might be coming towards me? Or am I going, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's see what's next. And then building on it. And so that skill, I think, is difficult because it's not natural. In general, we tend to protect ourselves, so we will say no to new offers that come in.
Yeah.
I give people those wristbands just so that then they don't have to remember the new skill. They can just look at their wrist and go, oh,
right.
Yeah, okay. So it sort of becomes an external object to try to help to remember the internal skill. And I do agree. I mean, I've came to this after 25 years of running Jet City Improv, and then years of doing improv before that too. I mean, I started doing improv probably in '86 or so. So the years of sort of drumming this idea into your head, and then it just becomes second nature. And you sort of start to go like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, what do you need? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey. And that also means then I will accept that, knowing that then there's something else that may drop off. And in that way, then I will figure out how I can empower other people to take those things. So it's a great management idea. Right?
Indeed so.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you a sense of ownership over
Yes.
life, because there can also be an apathetic, like, oh, this is what we're doing now, cool.
Yep.
And you just kind of feel pushed along by circumstance, even though you're technically accepting. It's more like giving up and being pushed,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying, all right, I'm choosing yes, and what now?
And that's the key, choosing.
Yeah.
If I choose to do something, then I can do that and I can have gratitude. If I choose not to do it and yet I'm forced to do it, there's a different way I will do it. There's a different method. All of it.
Yeah,
It
it's a
just
completely
doesn't-
different
It doesn't flow.
mind frame,
Yep.
frame of mind. Yeah, definitely. So when you look back at everything you have done, like as the good, bad, the business and the art, what are you most proud of having built or done or experienced?
I mean, the company definitely is a huge thing. It started out in the sense of I want to be able to get on stage. So if I want to get on stage, I can either sit and wait for someone to call me, and then I can show up in an audition, or I can answer ads, and then I'm sort of putting my career, my artistic future, my financial future, I'm putting it in someone else's hands.
Yep.
Or I can say, you know what, I'm just going to start my own thing, and then it becomes my work.
Yeah.
And so I think is probably one of the things that I'm most proud of. And then once you start that, it then becomes less about you doing the art. It becomes more about, well, how do I facilitate other people being able to do that as well? Which then in my world has led to, okay, well then how do you create a business improvement area in an area so that then the business can thrive? How do you create a creative district? How do you do this? So I think it, if we're not trying to make the world a better place where we live, then what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it is that kind of yes and idea.
Yeah.
And for me, those are the things that I think I'm most proud about is how can I be of service to what this next action is?
Yeah.
How can I be of service to this? And then what does that service look like and what do I do?
Yeah, and it's funny how it continues to expand, and suddenly other people see you as the thing you were trying to be because you started doing it.
Right.
Right? I had a similar situation. I've made my living as a writer now for quite some time, but I was really frustrated in my early 20s working at that bookstore. I'm like, I wanted to write about art. I wanted to be like an arts journalist.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get the job, so I created an online magazine that was doing art stuff. But then suddenly I was an editor-in-chief of an arts publication, right? And because, I had designed and written the whole thing, it was also my portfolio. So what do you know?
Yep.
Suddenly I had this credibility that I completely made up in the eyes of everyone else. And then you start getting the paid jobs and so on and so forth. So anyone out there listening, when it comes to your creative path, start making things yourself.
Well, and that is, and I mean, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of this, of what brought me here to Seattle.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Seattle, people would get together with a weird script and they'd be like, there's a back room in a coffee shop. I know it's supposed to be a radio play, but let's put it on stage as if it's a play. Great idea. There were places like the Sit and Spin where you did your laundry and then you had food in the front and yet there was a stage in the back.
Oh, I love that.
There were little tiny theaters everywhere, little places doing work, artists creating wacky stuff. And that energy was what drew me here. And it was a lot of people just going, I don't care. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to make my reality what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And I think then that grows into people look at things like the Fremont area of Seattle and they're like, oh, look at all the art and this. And it's kind of the artsy. Those were just hippie artists going, hey, I want to create my own thing.
Yeah. And then they did.
That's
the thing you got to do.
I think the story of Burien is kind of the same way. I mean, a lot of the artists who came before me have created this amazing Arts Aglow. Unbelievable. Right? All of the stuff that you see. I mean, BAT has been around for 25 years.
Crazy.
So more than that, when you think of the art that just was created here because people said, I just want to do it. That's the spirit we're looking for.
Exactly.
And then how can we foster more of that?
Right.
How can we fund more of it? How can we create the space, the opportunity? This radio station Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is another opportunity. Like, who wants to do a radio show? Come on.
Yeah.
You know.
Come on, come on. Yeah.
Right. And like you told me before we started, just that opportunity of like, oh, I could.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And then they did.
Right. And I think that's sort of the magic of it. You know, make the world what you want it to be, and make your own art.
Yeah, it goes back to that choosing instead of waiting for things to happen.
Yes.
Do you think, because you were talking about Seattle as a thriving creative place, do you think we've lost some of that as time has gone on? And what do you think accounts for that loss of initiative?
I think what loses it a little bit, well, I think it helps it and it loses it, is the affordability of being able to live and then having the time to do your work.
Definitely.
So as we sort of lose a little bit of affordability, then it becomes difficult for people to, I think of the times when I was bartending 2 days a week and still surviving. And, I was paying my rent, I was paying my bills, I was eating, and I was bartending 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time I could work on building my theater.
Exactly. Yeah.
So those sorts of, and I don't think we can do that in this region anymore. I do think there is something else which is part of the, sorry, I keep going back to the creative district, but it's,
well, by all means,
why we're here, is that affordable housing piece.
Yeah.
And for me, it's ownership. In other words, if I am able to buy into my own co-op or my own condo,
yes,
now I put down roots and then I say, great, how can I make my neighborhood a better place?
right.
So being able to provide creative people, artists, any kind of creative industry, the ability to set down roots and to say, here we go, and we have an affordable option for you.
Yeah.
And that then allows them to make this neighborhood a better place.
Yeah. That's an interesting point because I have never heard before of in efforts to fund the art starting with housing.
Yeah.
It's very basic, but that makes a ton of sense. I was often frustrated in my early 20s by all of the art I could be making if I wasn't spending all of my time surviving.
Yep.
And even still, like you were saying, bartending 2 days a week, I was reflecting the other day, like I was living in San Diego quite comfortably working at a bookstore for like $15 an hour, right? Yeah. And, I had a roommate, but it was fine. The apartment was big and I was very comfortable. And I'm thinking like, oh, I could not do that now. Yeah. And that wasn't that long ago. So yeah, that's if any enterprising person is listening, want to start a program of affordable housing for artists to enrich the community and the world.
And there are, I have a friend of mine right now who's a world-renowned playwright. Like she's traveling all over the world. She's writing plays everywhere. She's great. Part of what helped her to launch that was she got the Pony Fellowship in New York City, which is you get an apartment for a full year in Hell's Kitchen, this beautiful apartment, and you get paid.
Oh, yeah.
And your job is to spend an entire year just working on your craft.
There you go.
And that set her up for what is now this amazing future where theaters are paying her left and right in order to commission new pieces, and she's traveling the world. This is that chance, that opportunity to not have to think about those other pieces of life while you're just working on your art.
Yeah, imagine the art that can be made.
Yep.
I read somewhere, and it was the internet and not source, so I don't know if it's true, that's how Harper Lee was able to publish To Kill a Mockingbird. As her friends for Christmas one year were like, we've got your rent for a year. And she couldn't write the first draft. So, true or not, it's inspiring.
Wow, that is inspiring.
Be like, what have my friends been doing?
Yeah, really. Come on,
but
friends.
nowadays, that would be like many thousands of dollars. Back then, rent was probably $10 a month or something. Right. So that dovetails into my next question. We talked about triumphs. What have been your greatest challenges as an artist? Internal or external?
I think a lot of the greatest challenges that I've kind of dealt with is a little bit about what you kind of talked about too, the moments where you go, I can't do this. The moments where you sort of feel like that's not possible, or I'm not feeling the support, I'm not getting the support, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
And there were times running Jet City Improv too where it was like, oh, wow, I can pay my staff and I can't pay myself.
Yeah.
That's the way that's going to have to be this month. So we'll figure that out. And you work through those things. In some ways, I think you just have to have faith and kind of, knock on wood and hope that it keeps going.
And that kind of gives you the faith, because then when the next bad thing happens, you're like, well, I got through the previous bad thing.
Exactly.
So suddenly it's not as scary.
Hopefully, I mean, my work now is an independent contractor, so
same.
I get hired, I do work, great.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, when you look and go, oh, there's no bookings here for the next
Yup.
month. What am I going to do?
What do I do about that?
Right. And so I think you just kind of, go with the flow and you figure it out and you keep going.
It goes back to the yes and
Yeah,
mentality. Really does, especially as an independent contractor.
it really does in so many ways.
It really does. So how can the community support the work you're doing?
I think the biggest thing when it comes to community support is involvement. And I mean involvement in the sense of check out what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm on the Arts Commission as well for Burien, and there's so many different projects happening, and murals, and things happening in parks. And I think the question is whether or not people realize those things are happening or how they find out that they're happening, and then getting engaged with it happening.
Yeah.
One of the things we had found in the U District, and I think we find it here too, when more people are out on the street and they're engaged with those events, all of a sudden the crime rate goes down a little bit.
Oh.
So if people are concerned about crime rate, great, come out to an event. The more people you put on the street, the less crime you have.
Yeah.
And that's one of those weird pieces of how can the arts help economic development and all that.
Hashtag art saves lives.
It really does, damn it. I'm going to say it. And you said it, I'm following you. I think really the biggest thing that people can do is get engaged with it. Come see things. Art's aglow. It's amazing watching families walk around with the strollers. I'm watching every restaurant full. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All these events, the Strawberry Festival. This museum is amazing. And the depth of knowledge and pieces that are here. And I don't even know if a lot of people realize the museum's here.
Yeah.
Or they support it. Come support it. I mean, being a member of this museum is something like $40 a year.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
Pay the money. It's no big deal, right? And you're gonna blow that on coffee this month anyway. So who cares? And come and support the work that's happening here, like Seven Stories and all those other events. They're free.
Yeah.
Show up.
Yeah.
Come check it out. You don't like it? Great. Go find something else. I think getting involved, seeing what's there,
Yeah.
experience. You meet your neighbors.
Meet your neighbors, and just knowing that you can be involved and that your involvement does actually have an impact
Yes.
is big. I know for me as well, just knowing you get used to thinking you're one grain of sand in a huge,
Right.
huge beach, and it doesn't matter. But it does. It does to places like this museum and to the creative district and to your friends and neighbors and the artists in your life who are struggling.
Yeah.
It matters. So great. Well, is there anything else you would like to go over about the creative district or any of your other work or endeavors that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I'm going to be intimidated to talk about this in front of you.
Oh.
That's all right. I'm
later.
working on a book.
Yes! I love it. Tell me all about it.
I'm working on a book, working with some people right now after we had kind of talked about my workshops and the work that I do. And it's about listening without agenda.
Yes. I love that.
So it's definitely a business to business sort of book. And it's about how do I compile some of these stories from the experiences that I've had,
yeah.
putting things together, working with corporations, and then my teachings that I do, and how do I put that all together into some sort of a
guide.
a calling card.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah, but
And-
now I have to say that in front of someone who is a professional writer.
Yeah, well,
it's a little intimidating.
it's kind of like the thing I said where I started the website and then suddenly I'm an editor-in-chief. It's like I started doing stuff and suddenly I'm a writer. It
Well, there
doesn't
we go.
mean,
Good.
it doesn't mean, not that it doesn't mean squat. I don't want to be self-effacing, but,
I'm
no need
impressed.
to be intimidated.
I'm impressed. So there we go.
Well,
Call
I'm
me
impressed. I'm impressed with you. Again, as a fellow performer, and you forged a trail and again found the way to make your transferable skills transfer. That's awesome. Do you do much acting proper up here these days?
I have not, and I've been wanting to launch a couple of things here in Burien.
Yeah.
I haven't yet. My friends and I did one. We did something at the Tin Room in the theater this holiday season. We took a really bad Hallmark movie, and then we basically we commented on it through the entire time. We played bingo, we had sketches, and then we kind of recreated the end of it.
I love
So I don't know, just more than anything else, I was kind of like, it's an experiment.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Exactly.
And it sold out, and then people were going, why can't I get in? And I'm like, there's only 35 seats.
It's a small
Because
venue.
it's a small venue. But we are looking at ways that we can kind of produce some other stuff here. I think one of the things that the University of Washington sort of started under the idea of that theaters are like grapes, they grow better in bunches.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
I think the arts are all that same way too.
Yeah.
The more that we can get more people just creating small little things.
Yeah.
You create this small little thing here, this small little thing here. That suddenly then builds to bigger things, and then there's more people doing things. So
Yeah.
if I'm going to agree with that and I'm going to believe that value, then I
We
better
gotta do it.
get my butt in gear and start something. So there we go.
Build things.
Build things, people. Build
yeah.
things. All right.
The summary of this discussion is
There we
just
go.
do it.
Just do it. Damn
Just do it.
Just do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been lovely.
Thank you for having me in. And yeah, if anybody does want to get involved with the Creative District, BurionCreativeDistrict.org, check it out. And the website is in like 5 languages. It's
That's
really
accessible.
cool.
I love it.
It's really cool. It makes me very happy. Yeah.
Yes, it's awesome. It's awesome. So thank you for tuning in today for the B-Town Breakdown. And you can join us next week on Friday at 6 at 106.5 KQWZ LP FM.
Tune in for a new show every Friday at 106.5 KQWZ LP FM, South King County.